Hello to everyone here in London and to those of you watching online. Welcome to the fifth and final session of the Digital Classics Seminar 2025. For those of you joining us online, please do post any comments or questions you have in the chat, and we will address those during the question session after the lecture. So today's speaker is Chiara Senatore from the University of La Sapienza in Rome. After her master's degree in classical philology, Chiara is now working on her PhD in heritage science. As part of her research, Chiara spent 6 months at the Cologne Center for E-Humanities last year, and in 2023 she spoke at the Conference for Digital Research in Humanities and Art, and last June she presented at the annual conference of the Italian Association for Digital Humanities. Today, she will be speaking to us on a digital edition of classical texts for GLAMs. Please, Chiara.
So, thank you, Elizabeth, for your introduction. I'm Chiara Senatore, a PhD student in heritage science from Sapienza University of Rome. And today I will talk about my dissertation topic, which is digital edition of classical texts for GLAMs. First of all, I want to apologize for my Italian pronunciation, but I hope that everything will be clear. Otherwise, please feel free to interrupt me in any case. So I don't know if you are familiar with digital edition, if you are working on digital edition, if you are editors or just users of digital edition, but I would like to introduce a bit about what a digital edition is. So a digital scholarly edition, while sharing the same goals of a printed edition, is not the same as a digitized version of it, because it offers many advantages. Especially the digital environment has not problems of spaces, of course, so we can basically connect each digital edition with each other. We can insert hyperlinks with connect to online resources and so on. And it is possible to also have a collaborative editorial work on digital edition. So there are a lot of typologies of digital editions, but the main difference is the digital edition in text-only format and digital edition in which has the digital facsimile and the transcription in a diplomatic or interpretative way. Basically, the edition in text-only format is the edition that you can find, for example, in the online digital libraries, for example, in Perseus for the Greek text, and in the Latin library for the Latin literature. But for my research topic, I'm mostly interested in digital edition, which has the digital facsimile and the transcription. As you can imagine, of course, having the possibility to see the digital facsimile is really important, especially for a paleographic level of interpretation of the text. So my project is entitled Digital Resources for Manuscript, and the aim is to provide digital edition for GLAMs, so for museums, gallery, archives, and libraries. The main aim is to enlarge the public of digital edition, so my edition are thought to be used by a public which is not mainly academic, so it's a general public. But you will see that there are also some case studies that were thought also for an academic public, so for example, edition which has a critical apparatus. To that purpose, I use AVT, which is Edition Visualization Technology. I don't know if you know this software. I will talk a bit about it later. It's a software which is an open source software. I chose it mostly because it's a software which is highly customizable, both via configuration and CSS style sheet. Because, as you can imagine, each cultural institution has different aim for the edition. So it's important that each edition could be customizable. So my project, as Elizabeth said, was coordinated by the University of Rome La Sapienza, but I'm in Turin, so because my scholarship is funded by the University of Turin, and I developed a specific methodology for my project, which is always the same. So first of all, I chose selected cultural institution to which I would like to ask case studies. Then, when they provide me the digital facsimile, I work on the transcription and on the encoding of the transcription. I created the digital edition and I turn back to the cultural institution. And I ask them for the feedback and I try to make this feedback useful for the developers of AVT when the functionalities are not okay for having the things that they want. So currently the institution involved are the Museo Egizio in Turin, the Biblioteca Reale in Turin, and the Biblioteca Essense Universitaria of Modena. So let's say something about AVT. AVT, as I said, is open source software. It allows the visualization of the digital facsimile, which could also be AAAF resources, and the transcription, which can be diplomatic and interpretative in the same way. So I think it's really important, mostly for an academic purpose, that we could have a transcription which can be diplomatic and interpretative. For example, in a printed environment, it's really difficult to have that, and also to have the digital facsimile in the printed environment is not so simple because it's really expensive. So in some cases we have like an appendix with the reproduction of the manuscript, but in the majority of the cases we don't have the reproduction. So AVT allows the visualization of the digital facsimile with the transcription. The text is encoded, started from a XML TI encoding text. We can create name entity lists in which we can add also external resources. It uses the standard web technology such as HTML, CSS, JavaScript to ensure the long-term accessibility of the edition. Working with GLAMs has one important advantage, which is that they take care about the destination of the edition. So the editor has no problem about that, because if they put the edition on their website, they have to provide that the edition will be accessible also in the future. So the first case study is the case study for the Biblioteca Reale of Turin, which is the manuscript Varia 75. It's important to say that each case study is proposed by each cultural institution. So, for example, in this case, the manuscript was chosen because of the illumination. So the director thought that this illumination could be attractive for the general public. She said that the general public which saw manuscript with illumination were much more attractive from illumination instead of other kind of manuscripts, basically. So, in fact, the content is not so interesting. It's basically a collection of parts of the commentary of Guarino Guarini, Retorica de Regnum by Cicerone, and written by Ludovico Sforza. Ludovico Sforza was just a scholar, and he wrote this commentary for his parents because he wanted to let them know the level he achieved in his study with his master. So, I mean, the content is not really attractive, but the layout and illumination made by the court illumination was really nice on the manuscript. So this is the first case study, so I will explain step by step the edition, how is it created. So basically, in the first part of the work, I work only on the philological part. Basically, I wait for the digital facsimiles from the library, because it's always the cultural institution that provide me with the digital facsimiles. Then I work on the transcription, both the diplomatic and interpretative transcription, and in some cases I work also on the translation. In fact, as you can imagine, of course, if these editions are taught for the general public, the most important thing is that they are translated, in this case, into Italian, because the general public doesn't know Greek or Latin, ancient Greek and Latin. So basically, all the GLAMs wanted a translation, and that's a problem that I will explain later. So here we have the transcription. You can see that if you click on each word which is underlined, you can see the diplomatic term, so otium, which in the interpretative level means otium. This is the visualization mode in AVT facsimile and text, but you can also have the visualization mode text, in which you can see on the left the interpretative level of the edition, and on the right the diplomatic level of the edition. Of course, this layout is mostly important for academics. And here we are with the translation. The translation gave some problem for me with AVT2, because I worked with AVT2 Beta 2, which has not a proper tab for the translation. They are working on a new version on AVT, which is AVT3, in which starting from the suggestion of the GLAMs, there will be a layout visualization mode with the digital facsimile, transcription, and translation. But for now, we don't have it with AVT2, so I found that compromise I decided to put the translation in this tab that you can see on the right, which was thought to be originally for the info section. But in this way, in the visualization mode text, you can have the transcription on the left and the translation on the right. So for now, it's a compromise. Of course, all this edition that I'm showing will be put in AVT3, so there will be the path in AVT3, and there will be the triple tabs in which you have facsimile, transcription, translation. Then I work on the encoding of the text, and I decided to create as name entity list for this edition, a name entity list for people, and a name entity list for places. So if you select all, you see that both names, place name and names, and people names are highlighted. For each person, you can click on the name. You have some basic information such as date of birth, place of birth, date of death, place of death, and a brief description of the person. But if you click on the name which is underlined, you have an hyperlink to the Treccani Biographical Dictionary. So, for example, here is the case of Cicerone. You have a brief description, the hyperlink to the longer description, and a tab with all the occurrences that the name has in the text. For the place names, you have some information, the occurrences, but you can also see each place name on a map, infratext, basically. The last section that I created is the section for the description of the manuscript. This section depends always on each cultural institution. For example, in this case, the Biblioteca Reale wanted to focus on the physical aspect of the object. So we have the dimension of the document, the description of the ends, the description of the illumination, a really brief description of the content of the manuscript. But you will see that in other edition, other cultural institutions will focus on other information. So about the edition destination, it was put in the home page of the library. So there is a link that I will show, yes, with a brief description of my work, and here you can just go through the edition. Sometimes it's a bit slow, but here you can just go through the pages and decide what to look in the edition. So the second case study was the most challenging case study for me because it was the Greek papyrus for the Museo Egizio in Turin. Basically, it's also important to say that I'm not a papyrology. My field of interest is the Neo-Latin Zoepic literature. So having a Greek papyrus was really challenging, but the institution was really important. So as compromise, I decided to take a transcription from Pestman. So the museum accepted that, and I asked a professor of the University of Turin to guide me with the translation. Why this papyrus? Because it's the most important papyrus of the Greek archive of the Museo Egizio, and the most important papyrus of the Kwakiti archives. Basically, it's not really an interesting topic for the general public, neither in this case, because it's a legal proceeding. It's a really long proceeding because we have 10 columns. And it's about a proceeding between Hermias and the Kwakites. The Kwakites were a group that in the ancient Egypt took care about the mummies. Of course, the problem was how to make this topic interesting for the general public. First of all, we tried to create a connection, an image text linking line by line, because the museum thought that it could be interesting for the general public. As I say, they took the transcription by Pestman, so it's not mine. And then I worked in collaboration with the museum to find some criteria for the translation, because also in this case, they were really focused on the translation. So they wanted an Italian translation of the text, because the one of Pestman is of 20 years ago. So basically not so not so updated, but we have to decide, firstly, do we have to translate or Italianize the proper name and the honorific title? And we decided that no, because in some cases, especially for the honorific title, this could be a problem. For example, we have the honorific title Philoi, which of course could be translated as friends. But for the general public, if they read friends, they imagine that are friends of someone. But it's just an honorific title. That means that these people are from the upper class of the society. We also decided to insert some explanatory notes to clarify some historical, legal, or cultural aspects of that time. And it was interesting that for the Italian law, I don't know for the English law, but the topic is still contemporary because it's proceeding about a fight between Hermias and this group, because Hermias had this property, but he wasn't there for over 20 years, and so the property was occupied by the Quakites. So after some years, of course, in the ancient Egypt, if you don't stay in your property, you lose any rights, basically. And also in the Italian law, we have this kind of rule. So basically, it was interesting to say that in the tab in which we present the papyrus. Also in this case, I created name entity list for people and places. In this case, I created the name entity list also for deities and political offices, because especially for the political offices, I thought that could be interesting to give an overview to the general public about the cultural world about the Ptolemaic Egypt. About the encoding, it was the most difficult encoding also in this case, because AVT2, beta 2 didn't support the epidoc schema. So basically I had to use the TI scheme, but I tried to follow some suggestion from the guideline of epidoc, for example, to respect and to highlight Passman choices. For example, we have a lot of letters in the papyrus which are supplied by Passman, but in some case they are supplied because they are omitted. In some other case, they are supplied because they are lost in the papyrus. So in the encoding, it was important to use in both cases the element supplied, but with different attributes. In one case, I used the attribute reason omitted. In the other case, I used the attribute reason lost. Also for the visualization of the diacritical marks was a bit challenging, because of course AVT didn't provide an automatic visualization which follow the Leiden convention. So I had to create some CSS rules to try to obtain some diacritical marks. For example, for the elements for the unclear letters, I add this CSS rule to show these letters interdotted. So I didn't have a screen, but if you can see here, for example, X2, this tau is under dot. So the last thing that I made was trying to adapt the visualization mode, which for AVT is an academic visualization mode, also for a general public. So I have to rename some section. For example, before you have seen that we have description of the manuscript, because AVT was told basically for manuscript, but this is a papyrus, so I had to rename all the section, changing manuscript with papyrus. I try to make more simple and more easily understandable also all the other sections. For example, I changed the section with highlight names or no highlighting. And about the dissemination of the edition, basically it was put both on the portal of the Museo Egizio on a specific tab, and it was created an hyperlink on the catalographic on the catalographic sheet of this papyrus on the portal TPOP. I don't know if you know this portal. It's a database of the Museo Egizio, in which there are a lot of catalographic sheets of papyri that they have. And hopefully next year it will be put also in the visitor spot on a monitor touch screen. And of course, this will be a very important goal, because for now I have feedback only from the cultural institution. But it will be really great to have feedback also from users, so general users. So yes. The last case study is the case study for the Biblioteca Estense Universitaria in Modena, which is a case study for mainly taught for academics, because this is a Neo-Latin poem, Zoepic poem of 600 hexameters. It's divided into 4 books. There is only the Editio Princeps available, which was printed in Venice in 1550. In the title, the Myrmecomyomachia recalls the Batrachomyomachia, but the plot is taken by another Zoepic poem, which is the Moschea by Teofilo Folengo, an Italian author. And the main element is the parody of Homeric type scene. But we have also other classical echoes. The most imitated authors are Virgil, Lucretius, and Ovid. And so Conti is mainly influenced with reference to the vocabulary. In fact, the stylistic echoes are a way to highlight the literary skills of the author, but they are a pure rhetorical ornamentation and a means of creating the model he is parodying much more clear. AVT supports also an apparatus for sources and loci paralleli. It's important also in this case to encode the text in a XML TI format. For the critical apparatus, for the loci paralleli, you have to use this markup. So you have to use the element ref, which with inside the element bibl, author, title, cited range, and you will see that kind of apparatus for loci paralleli. And each parallel passage will be shown next to the verse of the poem to which it refers. At least in AVT2 beta 2, probably in AVT3 will be a more clear visualization mode. Here in the apparatus, you can also see the full bibliographical references and the encoding in XML format. About my experience with AVT for GLAMs, mine are not the first examples, but the experiment with AVT with GLAMs starts in 2023. In fact, there was this project, the Bellini Digital Correspondence Project, which was made for the Museo Civico Bellini in Catania, which was a multimedia museum for the Italian composer Vincenzo Bellini. And this project wants to create a digital edition of the autograph letter of Vincenzo Bellini, and this digital edition was put on a monitor touchscreen in this museum, so people could interact with these editions. Another case was in 2024 for the Canzoniere of Saba. Saba is an Italian writer from 1990, from the 19th century. And this canzoniere was the first canzoniere he wrote. This edition was made with AVT3, so you can see that you can see also the stratification of the variant of each witnesses. So it's an upgrade comparing it to AVT2. And also in this case, the edition was put in the visitor spot on a monitor touchscreen. So here you can see someone which is interacting with the edition. The experience with ABT for GLAMs, of course, has also a lot of disadvantages. Mostly, ABT was taught for a desktop visualization mode. So using a monitor touchscreen is just a compromise. For example, if you use your smartphone, the visualization is not the best for a digital edition with the facsimile and the transcription. Fortunately, there are new themes in ABT3, which means that it should be possible to customize the appearance of ABT3-based edition on touchscreen. Another problem was the layout, because the widgets were taught for the academic public. For example, in the first edition, you saw the tab MS description, but we know that MS is manuscript. The general public doesn't know. So we have to think also about this stuff when we think about an edition that is accessible also for the general public. Concluding, I think that my experience with the collaboration with GLAMs was really interesting, especially for the developers of ABT3, because we had some important feedback about things that I didn't consider. For example, the Egyptian Museum told us that the tab for the translation, which was originated for the info, could be also okay, but it's not okay because the text in the tab is not really readable for people who can't read in a proper way. I go a bit back to let you understand well. For example, here you can see that this tab for the transcription is not the same. You can say in the section for the translation also the text of the transcription a bit readable. So for people who are not really well easily in the reading, that could be a problem. Or they also told us that some colors are not the best for people who are not really capable in reading. For example, the blue is not the best color, and ABT2 has blue as a main color for highlighting. So concluding, of course, it's true that the audience interested in manuscript is mainly academic. But, for example, in Italy, the government has invested millions of euros for digitizing the ancient and precious manuscript. And I think that it's not fair that only people who can read and who can have access for working reason to this manuscript can know about this heritage. So basically, of course, it's a difficult thing to make it to make these manuscripts accessible for the general public. But I think that a compromise could be the insertion of this digital edition in the visitor's path. In fact, each cultural institution has always their most important manuscript behind the glass. But also, for example, for me, if I go here and I see a document in ancient English, maybe it could be difficult to understand something more about the manuscript. While having a digital edition with which the visitor can interact could be a good way to make it more accessible also for people who are not from an academic environment. And so I thank you for your attention. I leave here my mail if you have any questions.
Thank you, Chiara, very much for that very interesting and varied presentation. We'd now like to open up a session for any questions, first in the room here.
Yes, just quickly a question. The second manuscript, the Greek one, Tommy, Let's look at the date on it.
Yeah.
So it's AD or BC.
Maybe there is a.
Yeah, so I missed that bit.
Yeah, 1 second.
Right, as you said, it's the most important from the Turin Museum.
Yeah, there is a
It's
mistake.
100% PDA.
Yeah, because it's not AD but BC.
Oh,
Before Christ. Yeah,
is it
it's before
Doppel Christo?
Before
Christ. Christo. So it
Yeah.
should have been read.
Yeah,
It
BC.
should say 117 AC.
Yeah.
So it should be BC.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought so. Because that, but then it would, if it's 170 ATV Roman.
Yeah.
So that nullifies the question I was going to ask.
Yeah.
Because, the rules or the laws and stuff change, or legal stuff. Did it change when the Romans took over from the Ptolemaic? I thought it did.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting moment in time.
Yeah.
The laws in that time. You said something about ownership of property or something after 20 years.
Yeah. About this proceeding is about a problem because Hermias was the owner of this house, but he wasn't in the house for more than 20 years. And so this group, the Quakitis, arrived and settled there. But after 20 years, he decided that he wants his house back. But the lawyer says you have no longer any rights on the property because you were not in the property for more than 20 years. And yeah, it was interesting for the Italian public because we also have this right in Italian law that if you are not in your property for 20 years, you can't have any right.
This is like squatters' rights. Squatters sit in property for 12 years.
Okay.
That's interesting. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the three examples you gave are all, as I understand it, of texts of which there is a single source. So it's a papyrus, it's a unique document. I guess the commentary on that Heredium is just this one copy of it. And then I take it the edition of Princeps is, I don't know if it's the only edition, but it's, and the other editions come from it. But of course, many famous manuscripts that museums or galleries hold are of texts of which there are however many copies, notably of the Bible, where there are tens of thousands. And so I guess the question is, would you envisage doing this sort of work, say for a famous gospel manuscript that a museum wanted, like we have Lunda's Fine Gospels on display here in London? And if so, I mean, how would you then go about it? Because, I think that you had the word critical edition in your title. And of course, a critical edition of papyrus is something very different from a critical edition of a text that's transmitted by a whole manuscript chain. So yeah, I mean, in practical terms, do you think this would be something one would want to do with something like a gospel manuscript? And if so, how would you change it?
Yeah, so AVT also supports an apparatus, a critical apparatus. So you can work on an edition which has different witnesses, but you can't see all the facsimiles. I mean, you have to choose the Codex Optimus, and you can have a critical apparatus with all the variants. But for example, for the digital facsimile, you can choose only one manuscript for now. Here in the last slide, I show you an edition made with AVC3. I don't know, maybe it's a bit, yeah, here I can zoom. With AVC3, they are working on trying to have these kind of different colors, and each color is a witness. So, for example, you can decide, okay, I want to see all, and you see the different levels, 0, 1, 3. And this is an upgrade of AVT3. But to be honest, I don't know if there is a document that has a lot of witnesses, for example, 20 or more. I don't know. Yeah, I think so. So, I mean that for a document which has only 1 or 2 or 3 witnesses, it's fine, but for more, maybe it's a bit complicated for now. But probably they are developing, yes, new functionalities to make it more clear.
Even a print apparatus criticus groups witnesses, right? So even if you have 100 witnesses, you rarely have 100 variants of any one work. Right? They tend to be grouped along.
Yes,
So,
agreed.
so I think this sort of thing could be made to work.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, it's just a question of actual readability. I mean, the thing is that, you know, what's one of the things I think that print editions have right is that they have a text and an apparatus as separate things. Reading everything at once, I mean, if you actually want to read the text rather than do I don't know what, I think you need to separate out the text and apparatus.
Presumably, I mean, the people who designed EBT are mostly manuscript editors, so I'm sure they have the same sort of instinct as well. And certainly you could, in theory, have the apparatus, you know, at the bottom of the page, or even in a separate tab, or whatever. So yeah, that sort of thing. The more complicated it gets.
Yeah, and you can also have a visualization mode for the apparatus. This one. So you can have here not the parallel passages, but the critical apparatus. So maybe could be okay also in this way.
Yeah, much more readable. You know, sorry, other people should speak. I'll shut up.
That was really fascinating, and I think it's really great to also be considering digital editions from the perspective of user experience as well. And obviously, like people interacting with one of these editions in like a museum exhibit, they're only going to be doing it for sort of a very short period of time when they're standing in that room looking at that exhibition. Whereas I guess people using digital scholarly editions as part of their work, you know, might be more willing to invest some time in figuring out how that works if it's something that they're going to come back to. So I guess sort of my question is, what have you learned from this about making digital editions sort of immediately usable? How do you reduce what have you learned from this work with museums about reducing the sort of the burden on the user of figuring out how it works, and what would you suggest to someone making a digital edition in general, as sort of things that make it quickly accessible?
So quickly accessible, the first thing, as I said, is the translation for ancient text, because if a person doesn't know how to read ancient Greek, of course, he goes away. I don't expect that people read all the papyrus. Of course, they will focus only on a part of it, but at least they should be able to read it. So an Italian translation or an English translation is really important. Another important thing, for example, is to have also an English translation. For example, the Museo Egizio in Turin is, the second largest Egyptian museum in the world. So they asked, for example, for also an English translation, because a lot of visitors are not Italian. So these two things are the most important, but also, for example, putting hyperlinks. I think that for user is really important, the interaction with the edition. So if they can interact, if they can choose which kind of element they can read about, I think also for them could be interesting, and they seem to be part of this world much more than reading, okay, this is that. Also for the commentary notes, for example, they can decide on which commentary notes they want to click, which commentary notes they want to read, and so on. I hope that I answer.
Well, I mean, sort of like transport, but the indexing. Do we need an index for it? Is there an index for it? For instance, the printed version, the papyrus version, and the manuscript version. Is that into 3 categories?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's how does it work then? Sorry, begin.
Oh, because I work with cultural institutions. So each cultural institution decides which documents they want to give to me. So, for example, a library decided to give a manuscript.
I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. So another one, the papyrus, and another one, a printed edition, basically. So I try to, when they give to me the case studies, I try to decide if the case study is okay or not. For example, if in one case, the A library tried to give to me a document which has multiple witnesses, but they say no, it's not possible because it could be so really difficult for me. Thank you.
There's a question online.
Oh. Well, some institution wants to have in the visitor path a monitor touchscreen, but a compromise, because of course also a monitor is expensive, so they have to choose what to put on each monitor touchscreen that they have. So a compromise was in some cases to put a QR code that the user can scan and go to the edition. But of course, as I said before, the visualization of this kind of edition on the smartphone is not the best. So we always try to make it possible to have the edition on a monitor touch screen. I hope was okay. The answer?
Presumably, with the slightly more responsive and flexible EBT3 version you were talking about, some of those issues with a mobile device view are resolved. So, for example, presumably you don't try to look at multiple screens at the same time. If you're looking at it on the phone, you look at one at a time. So presumably some of those things are addressed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, also the visualization mode on smartphone will be better. I don't know exactly how, but I know that they are working on that, and that they are trying to improve the visualization also on the smartphone. Yeah. And especially they are working on the tab for the translation, because they understood, thanks to this experience with GLAMs, that the translation is really important for make this edition more accessible.
You mentioned that smartphone QR codes. I went to Cyprus talent shoot, but they put QR codes against each mausoleum in the Valley of the Kings and Paphos. The trouble is that the actual codes, the digital thing, had scorched in the sun. So when you try to put your phone, it just went mad. It couldn't pick up the information, which meant I had to go back to my old guidebook my father 20 years ago. So it's not a good idea just to have QR codes. The other things we touched on there, mobile phone technology keeps moving on, so some mobile phones can't read them. My wife's phone couldn't read it.
Okay.
And then museum ones. And so there are issues, and then of course old people aren't good on technology, so it kind of excludes people. So sometimes it's better to have a monitor or just a physical card on the screen. It's not a good idea.
Yeah, I think the same. That the monitor touch screen, it's the best. But just to wait to have this monitor, some institutions say, okay, let's try it with this QR code. But I don't have feedback from users for now. So I think that this will be an interesting research after my dissertation, because I only have for now the feedback from the cultural institution, but it's important to have the feedback also, for example, from users that say, okay, the QR code is not good at all.
So that's not the point of QR codes. I work in Mr. John Soane Museum. Not to say photographs. Let's change everything. Well, people took photographs on their mobiles. You had to switch your mobile off when you went in. QR code, you can't use it if your mobile switched off. Kind of things like that. And also the disturbance, people putting a thing over the code when someone's trying to look at the object. So it looks good in theory, but in practice, there's actually a lot of issues with it.
Yeah, you are right.
This is like we left technical. Could you tell us a bit more about your first text of this commentary on the Acarinium?
Yeah.
So I mean, this is obviously, I think it's Sforza was he was a member of the ruling family of Milan, I take it. So I mean, this is a fair copy, right? Like did he write this himself?
Yeah, he wrote this manuscript himself, and he left some white spaces. I don't know if I have here. You
Is
can
that for
see the
Greek?
white, for Greek, because in theory a Greek scholar would have had the Greek vocabulary, the Greek term, the Greek word in the white space, but something went wrong. I don't know what. So we have this manuscript with the blank spaces. But yeah, he wrote the manuscript because he wanted that his parents knew the level he achieved with his master.
But I mean, it's very beautifully written. So he was also learning to write this in this manuscript.
Yeah, and after also the court illuminators made the illumination.
Okay.
So yeah, but he was prince. So.
And so right. Well, it's amazing the print structure because I mean, how long is it? Is it mostly just derivative from other stuff?
It's 14 pages.
Okay, all right. And is it like has he sort of? Did you look into the sources?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why he selected the part of the commentary by Guarini. Because,
oh, you said that it was correct.
Yeah, but these parts are not, I mean, are taking at first sight completely with no reason. He just chose some parts and copied that, but without any reason.
It's an interesting example because I guess museum goers are interested in pretty things, right?
Yeah.
And then you're like, well, what does it say? Well, getting interested in what it says is actually very special.
Yeah. Yes, the director thought that this illumination could be interesting for the general public, and I think the same. I mean, seeing an illuminated manuscript, it's always impressive.
So you obviously had to do some work to adapt the CSS for the transcription of the papyrus to get things like the underdots and the Leiden symbols and the brackets. So is that sort of epidoc style thing something that can be included in future editions of EBT, or is this going to be something that has to be sort of customized on a project by project basis for each sort of particular by each particular institution, for example, because obviously dealing with manuscripts is a bit different from dealing with papyri, or if you wanted to do something similar with inscriptions, for example, or other types of texts.
Well, I think that for now this thing of epidoc is not a priority for the developers, because I think that using the CSS rule is a good compromise and a good way to add the diacritical signs. So basically other things, for example, new tabs or new functionalities is much more important for now. So I think that for now they are not focusing on that. But of course, also the possibility of having an epidoc schema is important. So they know that, but I don't think that for now is a priority for them. Yeah.
I was also going to ask about the FDoc, about the EVT platform. I was thinking particularly with the more flexible versions you were talking about in EVT3. Presumably, you could in theory have more than 2 views at a time, right? If you had you talked about having the manuscript image, the transcription, the interpretive and diplomatic versions, translation, the commentary, the description, physical description, the apparatus criticus, all in separate tabs. Presumably, it might be desirable to have more than 2 tabs at any one time, not on your phone, but if you had a big enough screen. So presume that's a possibility.
That's more than a possibility, right, because they are developing that, and also the fact to have a proper tab for the translation. So, for example, if you don't want to see the 3 tabs, but you would like to see only 2 tabs, you can do that. You can have only the digital facsimile and the translation, transcription and translation, or all these three things: facsimile, transcription, translation. So yeah, you will be able to choose about all these things.
And so I was wondering also about the diplomatic edition, diplomatic transcription that you're talking about, because diplomatic again means something different in manuscript studies than it means in epigraphy or papyrology. The diplomatic edition of a papyrus is all in uppercase, has no spaces, has no expanded abbreviations or all that sort of thing. So it requires a whole different set of transformations of the underlying TEI, which is why Epidoc does this using XSLT. But you could also do this using CSS or a combination of CSS and JavaScript, and there are Epidoc tools for that. There's the citation tool, for example, which presumably would be completely compatible with EVT when someone decides it's a priority to look at that. But I was wondering to what degree you're aware of, you've thought about, or you're aware of anyone else having thought about making that diplomatic page look more like what a papyrologist or an epigraphist would expect to see the diplomatic look like. In other words, a transcription that looks like the page of the manuscript.
Yeah, I mean, for the papyrus, I didn't make the diplomatic transcription. I just took the one by Petman, which is an interpretative one. But for the manuscript, I chose, for example, to correct the errors, to standardize the forms which are not in classical Latin, and basically that fit for my manuscript, because I had only these kind of things which were differences between diplomatic and interpretative level of transcription. But it depends on which cases, I guess. But I think that with the CSS rules, you can be able also to add all the diacritical marks that make more understandable your editorial choices.
What's the point of the diplomatic transcription of the manuscript?
I don't know. I thought that for an academic public could be interesting to see the differences between diplomatic and interpretative level, and also for the general public, maybe if there is an explanation in the tab or on the introduction section in the monitor, maybe could be interesting for understanding the editorial work. So what is the editorial work? For a general public, maybe could be interesting to see that we are not only transcribing the document, but we are also correcting some errors, standardize some words, and so on. But
Fair enough. I mean, you wouldn't want to do it on a big scale. I mean, like, we're changing all the C's back to T's.
Yeah, what a choice. I mean, I asked each institution, and I was like, okay, if they say no, I will not do that. But they say yes, okay, let's do that. And so maybe, they thought the same, that it could be nice for the general public to see the editorial work. What does it mean to have an editorial work on a manuscript?
So just a brief one. I know that the Museo Egizio has been redone. They've done a lot of the display the galleries. And have they, as a part of that, they done a digital manuscripts anyway themselves? Like the manuscripts and all the ones you've been doing, like the papyri that their collection had, when they displayed the museum, did they do a digital museum itself? Did they do a digital sort of library, as it were? Themselves, or?
They have a database online, TPOP, for the papyri, but in the museum they have only a case, but which is not really an edition. It's just a part of the papyrus highlighted with a translation, but it's just like 5 lines. So it's only to make the public know what that papyrus is. But it's not really scientific. I mean, it's just a way of showing that papyrus on a monitor touch screen. They don't have any digital edition of papyrus in the museum. They only have on their portal in the database.
So it's not established law.
No, yeah. Thank
You divide between vellum and what's the other word? One is from lamb, only for sheep, sorry, and the other one is it's any animal. Can even be human skin. For a second. No. And
Papyrus are from plants.
I know papyrus, but there's a difference between vellum and the other one.
The parchment.
Parchment.
The parchment. Parchment.
Parchment, that's it.
Yeah.
Parchment.
Yeah.
Is there a division?
But it depends on each cultural institution if they want to highlight that or not. For example, in this edition of the commentary, they were really interesting in the physical description of the manuscript. But for example, the Museo Egizio, I forgot to say that it was really interesting in the acquisition of the papyrus from the museum. So he didn't care about saying anything about the documents, about the physical description of the document, but they were only interested in saying, okay, we acquired that thanks to this founding and so on. So I mean, the info section about the document is always decided from the cultural institution. So if they want to say something which is more about the history of the manuscript, it's fine. If they want to say something about the physical description, it's fine in the same way. Yeah.
I find it difficult to tell the difference.
Yeah.
Have any more questions? Yes.
Just a brief comment. Do they have any, like in Vindolanda, you've got tablets, because they're made of wood and you've got wax tablets. Do you get those in Egypt too, don't you? I think. Do they find these wax tablets? The Roman ones. The Roman ones where you change the pages, but the leaves of wood and they've got the wax, you write the wax with the stylus. You find those in Egypt as well, do you?
I don't know that.
Yeah, interesting, because that's another, obviously you mentioned parchment, you mentioned papyrus, but also use the wax tablets, not to mention marble, of course.
Yeah, I mean, a previous version of AVT2 has also the possibility to see a 3D reproduction. So, for example, for objects like tablets or so on, I think could be nice in the same way. But now I think that they are no longer these functionalities. Don't know why.
All right, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, in that case, thank you all for joining in this session of the Digital Classics Seminar 2025. I'd like to thank our speaker, Chiara, and obviously all our previous speakers who've contributed to a very memorable and thought-provoking Digital Classics Seminar 2025. We will look forward to welcoming you next year, for next year's session in 2026. So goodbye from London, and hope to see you all, or some of you at least, next year.